Here we are on the hill. It's a Thursday morning, and I had planned on showing you some footage of our new sports hall, but it's a bit foggy, and I'm sure that you remember what the weather was like on the hill when you were here. This week's piece by Mark is a conversation he had with Jonathan, who was here in the 1980s. And Jonathan kindly met with Mark in London, and they met at the Cheese Grater building, which is where he worked. They've got some great footage where they go through old magazines and old photos, and I think the best thing that I've seen from that footage is it's all about friendships that were formed here on the hill, and they're friendships that still maintain in the city. So that group is pretty special, and I'm happy that you get to see them.
I love my time at Kingham. I love the people, I love the location. There's so many good things about it. When I started at Plymouth, that was fine because the age range was always very close. There's only a couple of years there. And I very much enjoyed my time at Plymouth. I was meeting a whole lot of new people. When you move to the bigger houses, obviously you've got to become a little bit more aware of the pecking order, and you're dealing with much larger teenage boys than yourself, and you've got to understand where you fit in the overall scheme of things. When you're looking up within your house, I thought our sixth form were quite highly revered. They were, even at that age, although they're only 17 or 18, when you're coming in aged 10 or 12, something like that, that age gap certainly puts them on a pedestal. Dave Knott certainly ruled the house with him and Nipper Davis.
The 1981 school magazine, I did the artwork. That is a cartoon of Reverend Bob Shepton, so he built an assault course for the school, and I think it was in that year. So that was my interpretation of Bob from behind. So you noticed the kilt. I think he was Scottish by trade. That was the commanding officer of our brigade, which is not a very flattering portrait, but that's Mr. Craig White, because his nickname was Turkey. So it's interesting going through some of these photographs, which I very rarely do. They've been stuck up in my attic for some time. Plymouth House, Mr. Williams and his wife Margaret, Mr. Rees, who was a woodwork teacher, Andrew Adonis in the background there, Adam Maliu. And then I moved on into Norwich. And it's just interesting seeing in these photos, you start off in the front row, and then as you get more senior, you move further back, and then the guy sitting down and the prefects, they were sixth form, Nipper Davis, Dave Knott. These were probably lower sixth because they're standing, the upper sixth was sitting. Geoffrey Nicholson, Colin Concord. He wasn't called Colin, he was called something else. Colin might have been Smith. But from the side, he looked not unlike a former. And this guy, Wright, I think he went on to be a mechanic in Formula One. The Rowe brothers, Sam Knott, and I forget these two guys. As I got older, I moved from the front further back. I think that was in my lower sixth year, with still Gus Hussain being the housemaster. And I think that was the year before. So it's interesting seeing all us boys growing up together, maybe losing a few friends along the way in terms of leaving the school or graduating, moving on elsewhere. But it's good to look back and see how these people developed. That is Roger Ellery, his brother, Guy, famous magician Andrew Dauncey, and loads of others. Ian Solly, he's became a musician. I think he's come to some of the Old Boys events as well. So for me, happy memories in Norwich House.
There was a guy in my year who I came to admire, and tragically he's died now, but I guess Simon Bowden was his name. He's in one of those shots. He was I guess you call it gay now. He amazed me because he took a lot of stick. I knew the questions were coming, and it's like, well, maybe it's not just about who the head boy was. And I was friendly with Simon, and I'd see him occasionally in the holidays for the first couple of years, and I knew he was gay. That's what he was teased at a bit at school. But eventually, I think he left and he got AIDS and he died. But I hadn't seen him since he left school. But even when he was at school, it wasn't probably until I can't remember if he was in the lower sixth or not, but it wasn't until he was in the fifth form, I think, that the boys started leaving him alone. But it was a very tough time, I think, for him, because he was so overtly gay, which is not a problem. But that time ago in a boys' school, there was quite a lot of phobia around that. But he came through it, and anyway, he's sadly gone. But I had a lot of respect for him because he put up with it, and he didn't change who he was or try to change who he was. He couldn't anyway, but he put up with such a lot, and eventually, I think I have to say, I think he got a lot of respect for it. I meet up with our crew about 3 or 4 times a year, and it's the same old stories and it's the same old chat, but we absolutely love it. It's all about old times. It normally starts with, have you seen this person or have you seen that one, and then it very soon lapses into old memories. But most of the stories are about what you used to get up to, what you did that was maybe a little bit more outside the rule book, as it were. But it's just good to chat and catch up and to hear news about what other boys are doing. And going back to these events now, I didn't do it for a long time, but I went to the RAC club. It was brilliant to see people. To one guy I hadn't seen, Matthew Bland, hadn't seen him for 30-something years. I wouldn't recognise him. I passed him in the street. So brilliant to catch up with these people. And I told them, I'd been busting to tell this story for literally that long. We were in a maths lesson at top school with Mr. Leake, and it was fairly quiet. There was probably about, I don't know, was it 15, 20 boys in the class, and outside of the class there was a telegraph pole, and it was a summer's day, and Mr. Leake was teaching, and all of a sudden a squirrel ran along the line, down the telegraph line, and some boy said, Sir, there's a squirrel outside. And Mr. Leake just sort of said calmly, absent-mindedly in fact, he said, oh yes, yeah, I see him quite a lot, he's often there. And as if by one, the whole class got up and said, where sir? And they all rushed to the window. A couple of boys actually jumped out of the window, and the whole class was absolutely buzzing, saying, oh sir, where's the squirrel, sir? And whilst there was no particular punchline, it was just an endearing story of how the sort of general fun nature of the boys came to very often, sometimes to distract the lessons. But I think Mr. Leake was very surprised to see his whole class disintegrate in front of him. Another story which was funny, I think I was in the second form, and Mr. Gilmore was teaching history at the time, and there was a bit of noise in the class. I think it was just beginning, and the class was beginning, and he was trying to settle everything down, and he was struggling to make himself heard, and eventually he got quite cross, and at raised voice and I'll do the accent, he said, "Whoa, come on now, boys. Every time I open my mouth, some fool speaks." And again, the whole class disintegrated, and once he'd realised what he'd said, actually did chuckle along too. From that perspective, I think Kingham has had such a huge part to play in all of our lives. It's taught us about friendship, relating to other people, values, I don't know of old boys from other schools who relate to each other in that way. I don't know, but I don't hear of it. I don't hear of other guys saying, "I'm getting together with some old schoolmates." So there is that sort of seems to be quite a close bond, I think, which seems to be quite tight between all the old boys.